Hi, Golnaz. Welcome. Thanks
Hi.
for being here.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
I know that you work at Microsoft. We want to make sure that everybody knows that the opinions that we're going to hear today are strictly yours and not reflective of Microsoft.
Exactly.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on now?
Yeah, I work at Microsoft right now in an organization called Experiences and Devices. Basically, I lead an effort on AI productization.
Tell us what exactly that means.
So basically, we're trying to imagine what new experiences and products AI can enable in the future. So innovating new products based on the AI models.
Tell me a little bit about your background and how you got into this kind of position.
Sure. So my background is in engineering. Initially, I have a PhD in electrical engineering that was focused on computer vision and image video processing. Then I worked at Sony Research for 2 years on some computer vision projects. And then I joined Apple. And at Apple, I was there for almost 7 years in different product sectors. So I worked at anything on related to input devices, mixed reality, smart home, and AI/ML teams. And at Apple, because I was always at the very early stage of product making, and I had the chance to work with a lot of really good designers, and got more looked into the design process. And I even sat in one of the design studios for 2 years, and that gave me an immersive experience into how the creative processes work. And that has kind of changed my views around product thinking. And then I joined Microsoft almost 2 years ago at the office of the CTO. And recently I've joined the Experiences and Devices team at Microsoft.
Cool. It sounds like you've been up to some cutting edge stuff.
Thank you.
How did it change your views on product thinking?
So basically, what was interesting to me is that it wasn't about technology for the sake of technology. Even if you brought the coolest technology, the question always was, so what can it do for people? So you always measure the value in terms of what value it brings to people at the end of the day. And I think that was an important lesson to me. And also something important is that design and research and engineering really should work closely to ensure a really compelling product at the end of the day.
So since you are at this intersection of engineering and design, how does that give you insight in how to organize your team, especially with all this experience you've had being around both sets?
First of all, as I mentioned, it's important for me to create a flywheel between research, technology, and design. So basically, knowing what you want to build at the end of the day and what the user experience should be would basically push us the research to accomplish the tech that is needed. But also the technology side of it and the limitations informs designers on how to address basically failure cases, how to manage people's expectations. So first of all, with any team, I try to create that flywheel. And also, I always like to have some generalists on my team. So people who kind of have different, basically backgrounds in different disciplines. For example, engineers who have design sensibilities, or designers who can either code or can, are interested in learning more about the tech side of things.
Dan, how many people do you usually organize your teams with?
Well, I have had teams between 5 to 10 people, I would say. So basically small but high performance teams.
Okay, and would you say that's the sweet spot?
Yeah, and I try to have basically a diverse set of background, so that the team is really capable of building end-to-end prototypes. So I have designers and basically engineers and maybe sometimes machine learning scientists on the team to enable kind of a fast-paced prototyping.
So you mentioned in your answer previously that you determined the success, not really on whether you use the coolest or latest technology, but on whether the product is useful to people or to the end user. How do you measure whether it's useful or not? How do you even know?
I would say useful is one factor, but also like, does it bring joy is also a valid thing. Like sometimes the technology brings fun and joy to people, and that's also a great technology. It doesn't have to be like measured in terms of like productivity always. But I think the way we determine that is through having a rigorous iterative design process.
Why don't you tell us about this rigorous design process? I know that some teams are all about it, and I come from a design background, so we definitely have some of those. But I've also worked with companies who are like, "What is that? And what are you doing? I don't get it."
Yeah, so that process involves 2 phases. The first phase is about elaboration, and then the second phase is about reduction. So the first phase is super important. In the elaboration phase, you're supposed to really go broad, basically consider many possibilities, many paths, and options to make sure you don't land on the first thing that comes to your mind, but actually explore the landfill. You start prototyping. So basically from those ideas, you try to communicate ideas in different ways. Sometimes you sketch them out. Sometimes you build it's interactive prototypes. Sometimes it's like more elaborate. It's like live-on prototypes. But the important thing is that you start showing things around and hearing people's feedback, kind of incorporating that feedback loop into your work. So sometimes the outcome is that somebody's like, oh, have you tried this and that gives you even more ideas. Or sometimes you think an idea is really good, but you put it in front of people and they're really confused. So you're like, oh, maybe I should rethink that. And sometimes like a bunch of ideas really creates a smile or pleasant surprise to people. And you're like, oh, maybe I have something here. And you kind of take another step at that iteration.
So as you're doing this and you've decided like, okay, I've got some reaction, so this may be one that we invest in. How do you sell that to the higher ups?
You go through that iterative process a few times. So every time you refine it, you polish it, maybe you build more, basically you invest more in the prototype to make it more real every time, so that they see the end experience and user experience. And if they try it and like it, that you have a better chance of selling it. Also, this comes at the reduction phase, which I talked about the 2 phases. In the reduction phase, you engage marketing teams, engineering teams, and other teams to think about feasibility, timeline, how much it would cost to build this, how much it would sell, and basically doing some market research and user research to making sure, it lands at the right price, right time,
So this sounds really great for large companies, like how you've worked at Apple and Microsoft. Can you see the same process working at like smaller startups?
Yeah, so in the smaller startups, what I've seen people doing successfully is incorporating some of their basically some of their early adopters into that feedback loop. So basically, releasing some version of the product, getting early feedback, refining, really listening to the feedback, and basically doing that iterative process, but with the audience.
So I know you've worked with companies that are more creatively driven and apt to adopt this kind of process and those that aren't. But what do you see as the impact of on success in terms of the product quality and profitability?
I mean, it's interesting because I would say all the companies I've worked for have the creativity process and the tech process, but with they have been in different spectrum, different part of the spectrum in terms of which one is more important. And almost all of them have been very successful companies. But what's interesting is a differentiation between consumer versus enterprise sector. So when it comes to consumer sector, it's really important to have really high quality, something that is really simple to use, so you have the largest audience, and basically something that is competitive in the market. In the enterprise sector, there's some difference because your customers are other companies, and sometimes when those companies want to buy your product, different things are more important. So for example, security might be the most important thing for those companies, or having as many features in one product is more important, which is sometimes not necessarily a great thing for a consumer product, because you don't want to jam a ton of feature into one product that makes it super complicated to use. So then you have to invest more in the creative process to make sure you create a very simple, elegant solution that most people can relate to.
So we're talking about like needing to innovate more and sometimes just building on other products to get a lot of features in. So there's a balance between reacting to competition and needing to innovate on new ideas. And a lot of companies get stuck here. And then there's the need for companies to, like you said, especially in enterprise, to have lots of features. Where's the balance so that your company is still on the cutting edge of new ideas and moving forward, and is not going to get run over from a startup that can move fast and easy?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think if the companies are always after making the current product better or going after the competitor, they're always in this kind of a catch-up mode. So they only react. So the customer said this, let's react to it, or the competitor released this feature, let us add the same feature. So you're always a little bit behind because you're trying to catch up. But instead, it's important to have resources allocated to innovation in the company that is well connected to the rest of the product making arm of the company. So that innovation unit makes sure the company always thinks about, new product lines, new transformative features, so that you look way ahead of time, and that gives you a better chance of building something that puts you at a competitive advantage.
So just to build a little bit on that, where do the companies get stuck in this innovation part in terms of like incremental culture, like where they fall in ruts?
One thing that happens is that if, let's say, you have a really successful product in the market and you have a big chunk of the market share, what companies tend to do is they invest in making that product faster, cheaper, optimize it in certain ways, which is important, but it only leads to incremental changes, and sometimes like they're blindsided by, as you said, like some small company will come and brings an alternative solution that is much better. So then that has caused really good companies to go bankrupt, like Blockbuster versus Netflix, for example. And the other thing I would say is making sure, like some companies have really great research teams, but that doesn't necessarily translate into constant innovation in the product making. So having, as I said, a tight connection between research and R&D with product making part of the company is really important.
Do you have insights on how to balance the immediate needs of the profits and the time it takes to create a new product and bring it to market? Again, coming back to this, you have a research team in-house trying to come up with new stuff, but then you need immediate profits right now, especially with the recession.
Yeah, definitely that changes depending on the external factor. So first, if you have maybe one product, if you're making one product, and that has to have certain quality. So you can't just, say, okay, I do one average version of this, put it out there and move on. It has to meet certain bar. So if the company makes, let's say, its first product, or only has one product, then hasn't shipped, or has shipped but has a lot of problems, it's important for the company actually to have a focus and make that product as best as they could. And once they know they make a really great product, then move on to other things or think about what's next. So it's important to have that balance, like if you haven't reached that point, like a lot of things I mentioned is actually for companies who have made a few successful products. But when you're at the very beginning of the company, you have to have focus and direction.
Okay, so innovate first and land one product before you move on trying to like innovate the rest of the world.
Yes, definitely.
So I know in all companies, there can be internal competition that hinders ideas and stymies product advancement. What practices foster collaboration and circumvent this challenge? Like, what are some best practices you've put into place?
So I think some healthy competition is fine, as long as it doesn't get toxic or creates these basically silos. So I think information sharing is important, having, again, like a safe environment where people are willing and motivated to give constructive feedback or ideate with you is really important, as opposed to like, people holding back and try to, I think one thing for the companies to take into consideration is, the reward system. So the reward system shouldn't be necessarily whose idea was this, but also the whole process of, okay, we started this idea, we executed this idea in the best we could as a company, and it shows success with the hopefully with the product in the market. You get that feedback and user metrics, as opposed to rewarding people like, oh, whose ideas was this, or let's give credit to that one person who had the idea.
Right, and then that's when people hold back.
Exactly.
Where do you see tech companies edging out their competition in the future in terms of the kind of technologies they adopt, or any other practice that you're saying, if people who are doing this I would suspect they're going to succeed and kind of beat the competition, and people who don't are going to lag behind?
So I think, again, knowing, like following up the trends and where the technology is going, and also thinking one step ahead and thinking about, okay, the technology is getting to a certain place, it seems like, what can we do with it? How would we empower people using these technologies, and basically thinking it in terms of what it can bring to the user. For example, with the new AI models coming out, large language models or diffusion models, or other AI efforts, it's important to be on top of that and learn about what's going on, what's going to come up, and think ahead on how you can leverage that in your company.
Do you think people should start implementing that in their products where they can now, or they don't have to think about it now, sometime in the future? What's your opinion on adopting these AI models?
I think this field is moving so fast, and there are really great things you can do even now with the technology. Yeah, I think if you have a great idea, you should definitely try it out. But sometimes also important not to rush things, because there are a lot of implications that are important, like responsible AI is a huge topic that researchers are looking into, because if you don't think about that aspect of it, terrible things can happen, and it actually can create really bad results or harmful results.
Can you talk a little bit about responsible AI?
This field is about it's a really broad field, and considers many different aspects of the technology, but simple things like, can this harm people in any way, and thinking about inclusivity, for example, or with the technology, can you create misinformation or hurt certain group of minorities? Is this inclusive enough? Can it be abused by certain group of people? So these are all big topics that people are researching about.
Right now, we're seeing AI used a lot for generating art. What is your ideas around that? And I see pros and cons of each, and I also see it with writing. And what is your opinion on how that will be used in the future? What you like about it? What you're cautious about it?
It's kind of exciting, especially if you don't have really great art skills. It's nice to bring your ideas to life and kind of see them. Like if you have some concept in mind and you want to visualize it somehow, it's really great. I don't think the technology is exactly there yet to say, okay, we don't need any designers or artists. You always need somebody with, creative skill set and design skill set in the loop, I think. One thing I'm worried about, especially when it comes to writing, is what if people stop generating content? So everything out there is AI generated, and then, the world be kind of skewed into one direction. And especially because the AI models are trained on what's out there. So after a few years, if there's nothing human generated, they would be trained on themselves. So it creates like a very skewed kind of feedback loop.
Do you see, like, we talked about safeguards and like the safe AI, building that in. So do you see something and being able to recognize what kind of copy is built by AI, or do you think that's going to be impossible?
Yeah, that's an active area of research, like watermarking AI generated content versus human generated. I don't think there is a solution out there yet, but people are working on it.
So when you have companies like CMOs or my company who are just like, oh, great, I'm going to replace my marketing team with an AI to create the content, written content and digital content, do you think that's possible, or you're still going to need human help?
I think a lot of time consuming or like rudimentary part of the process can be automized by this. Especially it could give you ideas about the ad campaign, but sometimes these generative models create basically, they can hallucinate and it's not necessarily factual. So you definitely need someone to review what's generated, make sure it's the right content, it says the right thing, you know. Short term, definitely it needs people to be in the loop. But also it creates this interesting questions, like maybe in a few years, you don't do your own shopping, your AI does your shopping list, chooses the right brands for you and does the shopping for you. So then you have this AI that does the marketing. So the AI tries to sell to your AI. So then how do they interact, or what happens then is interesting.
So then that creates another interesting feedback loop that nobody's quite thought of or taken into account.
Probably. So maybe the one AI tries to trick the other AI algorithm or something like that.
I would love to figure out how to design that. That would be a good one. So, okay, continuing on this conversation with AI, there's computational costs that will create new challenges. What have you seen come up already in terms of creating and implementing new products? And how are teams getting around these challenges?
Yeah, so I think that field is also moving really fast. So for example, with GPT, it used to be taking a few seconds to run each prompt, and now ChatGPT is almost instant. And I think it's optimized drastically. Same with Stable Diffusion, for example, you can run it on a laptop. And there was an announcement that I think Stable Diffusion can run on iOS now. So definitely people are working on optimizing these models or versions of these models that could be on your devices and become faster and cheaper to run.
So in terms of innovating, would you say go ahead and create your ideas, and by the time they're ready to be made, it's probably going to be fast enough to implement?
For sure, I think so. Yeah.
You know, I bet a lot of people are gonna like hearing that. So what are your thoughts on the metaverse, machine learning, NFTs, Web 3.0?
So I'm not an expert in any ways around NFT or crypto. With metaverse, I really think it would only be successful if the user experience is compelling enough and it's something people want to spend a long time in. So the form factor to me matters a lot. Is it something you can, you know, it's a lightweight product you can wear? Also, is the user experience significantly better that makes you want to wear the, you know, head-mounted display?
Do you think these new technologies are going to replace what we're doing in real life, or they're just going to be kind of like an add-on? Like, I will do this real life part, and then also this will be cool too.
Yeah. So I hope that these technologies can enhance what we already have, as opposed to kind of isolate us and make us want to, for example, go to our own bubbles, or, you know, avoid other human connections. I hope that's not the future. But you never know, you know, even with the cell phones, even though we're easily connected to a lot of people across the world, sometimes it takes away from our presence in our daily lives.
would you say companies in the future are going to use these things just to build products, or they're going to be built, added in for brand building? There's going to be a combination of both. Where do you see that as well?
You mean AI or
like yeah, using AI, using any of the GPT-3 models, using any of the metaverse stuff? Like, do you think they'll end up being standalone products, or they're going to be incorporated into all kinds of brands to just build out the brand experience, not necessarily to replace physical products?
I think there's possibility for both. So for example, ChatGPT by itself is a very compelling, almost addictive product by itself, even though it's just a showcase of a, you know, they call it a research version of their product. But yeah, but also on top of these models, you can create a lot of different features and products and user experiences that people haven't thought about yet.
Yeah, right now with the NFTs, we're seeing them being used in video game stuff. Trump just released his NFT playing cards. Like, do you see these standing the test of time, or is this kind of like a fad?
Again, like with NFTs, I feel like I don't know enough to make a call. But with the AI stuff, I feel like it's not just a hype. There will be, I mean, there will be use cases where we, you know, there will be scenarios where we use these on daily basis.
So you mentioned that like the Chat GPT is almost addictive. Like, what do you mean by that?
It starts from like, first I started trying out different things to kind of poke at it in different ways and see what's possible. But sometimes you kind of ask its opinion about an email, or, you know, get help to write an email, write a text message, or like, what should I do in this situation? It's almost like you kind of have a buddy to check with different stuff. And then in different situations, or like you're like, oh, let me ask ChatGPT, you know, just to make sure, or like, maybe I didn't think about this, let me check with this, if it check with ChatGPT. But I mean, that being said, it has its own limitations too, but already is a very compelling piece of technology.
And who knows, with future iterations, some of those limitations may become mitigated.
Definitely, yes.
So do you see it like almost replacing human interaction? Like, why do you need to ask like your coworker when you can go check in with ChatGPT?
Interesting questions. I think as humans, we still are not, like, there's part of us that is only satisfied by having that human connection, and like there's certain qualities you cannot replace, like empathy and emotions and things like that. But if like, there are a lot of people, I mean, there are a lot of people who suffer from loneliness, and, you know, maybe you don't have access to a lot of people. Maybe you just moved to a new place, or you have social anxiety. So I can see this technology helping those people, and, you know, maybe not replace human connection, but actually even help them create human connections, because it helps you overcome your anxiety, or be there for you while you're feeling lonely until you make the new friends.
This comes back to your whole theory of innovation being based around the user, not the technology. So again, looking at what needs are there.
Yeah, definitely. So it's more about enhancing people's lives or helping them overcome a challenge, than let's, you know, put people out of job or replace, you know, human connections.
Right. So you may not need to use the new technology just because it's new and exciting. It's better to to solve the problem, the people problem first.
Yeah, because if it's just about coolness, the coolness will wear off after a while. If you want to have success over a longer period of time, it has to be something that brings value to people's lives, so people kind of can after a while rely on it and really adopt that technology.
What have you seen in your experience as the biggest determinant of success in the companies and the teams that you've worked with?
Again, going back to what I said about companies making products that become super successful, and then instead of thinking, okay, what's next or what else they can do, they only focus on enhancing that product and adding more features to it. I think that over time, they might be blindsided by smaller and more fast-paced companies that can bring like alternative products to the market.
And then to recap, in order to do that, it needs a combination of creativity and new technology.
Definitely. Having that design thinking process, having creative thinkers into the process of product making, as well as, pushing on the technology side of things.
How do you think open AI will affect marketing?
As I mentioned, the way I think about it is like short term, technologies like GPT can help you come up with a marketing campaign, even like, you can ask GPT, for example, what's important, what are the top 3 factors when people want to decide when they're buying a bicycle, for example, or when they're buying a couch. And, these technologies can actually tell you, like, these are the top important factors, or this is how you make this text more exciting and more motivating. So they can help with that creative process. But obviously, it needs the marketing team to be in the loop and make sure, whatever is generated is factual, and, it's not just, sometimes it creates random but compelling paragraphs. But long term, as I said, it becomes more interesting because, when the AI does the shopping, then what? Then how does the marketing would shape?
I think that part's really fascinating to me, because I'm not sure people have thought about that too much yet.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about it.
I know you've mentioned to me before that you've had to build teams from the ground up. What are the challenges you face with that?
First of all, it's really important you bring the right people, especially the first few people are really important, who you hire, because you're building a culture from ground up. And then it takes some time for all these people to get to know each other, get to know, the rhythm of the company and the process. So it takes time to get to a place where everything goes very smoothly and everybody works together in a harmonic way. And it's okay in the beginning, you might feel a bit of friction, but I think it's okay. It's important to hear people out and making sure what the passions are, what people are more passionate about, what motivates them, what kind of prevents them to do a good work, so that you always have that in mind.
So when you're building these innovation teams, and you mentioned that the first few are very important on getting right. Do you focus on generalists at that point, or people who have like a narrow expertise, or does it matter? It just, you want to get the right people in?
I think in the beginning, it's sort of like building a startup. So you need people who can wear different hats. If you hire, maybe you hire really good scientists, but if you don't have anybody to build a prototype around it or design UI on top of it, it might not go any further. But yeah, in the beginning, I would definitely bring generalists to the teams who can wear different hats.
And then what's the benefit or drawback of putting together your own internal team rather than going to an outside agency to help with all the brainstorming or building your prototypes?
Yeah, great question. There are definitely pros and cons. I would say having an internal team. So basically, if you have like, full-time employees, they are more invested in the overall product, especially like they think of it as a multi-year thing. So they're more motivated, more invested in the product at the end of the day. Whereas maybe the agency kind of, when they're done with the project, they're done and they move on to something else. They don't necessarily care if 5 years from now, is it successful still or not. But sometimes you need to you need certain skill set for a short period of time that is not there. So I think that in that case, definitely makes sense to hire an agency because if you hire somebody full-time and most of the time they have nothing to do, it's also not a great experience for those people.
Did you want to talk a little bit more about how do you get buy-in from the wider team in terms of building alliances?
I think it has some overlap with what I said before in terms of getting feedback. But I think something that has helped me over time is creating, like, networking is really important. I always encourage my team to create organic connections with different teams. And down the road, you never know, you might kind of get a project that really needs help from the other team, and these connections really help you down the road. Also, I think it's important to learn about what different leaders are concerned about. So if, for example, you're talking with the CFO, it's a different way, different things matter to them as opposed to if you're talking to head of design or head of engineering. So it's important to think ahead of time what their concerns might be, and either you come up with like a clear answer or a path to finding answers, or you get their help to reach those answers.
Do you ever have a project where you're presenting to like one group and then they don't care about it, but another group really cares about it, and so it's jumped from different groups within the organization?
Yeah, totally. Actually, it happens a lot because different product teams have their own cycles, shipping cycles to worry about, different customers. So one idea might be it might not be worth pursuing some idea in one product team. It might need a lot of, resources or changes in the code, whereas it kind of fits in one other product. It might fit like a puzzle piece into their product. So, and it's exactly what their customers want. So it's important to show your ideas that you find compelling to different people in different sectors, for sure.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this makes the case for your networking within the organization.
Definitely, yeah.
What do you like most about your job?
What I love about my job is that I get to work with a lot of creative people, and also I have a lot of room for innovation. So I'm not bound by a lot of limitation and restrictions, and I really enjoy that.
That's awesome. All right. That's all I've got. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for inviting me.